Look at comparing fractions. This is part two. We've done one before with using models. We have models or visual representations here as well, but we're going to look at more comparing with either the same numerator or the same denominator, and how really we don't actually need models to help us, but will hopefully become clear as we work through this. We have our vocab, numerator, denominator. We'll talk about those as we come across them. And when we compare, we have our symbols greater than, less than, or equal to. So let's go through the first example. So we have 4/6 here, and here it is a visual representation. We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. That's your denominator. The total number of equal parts is your denominator. The numerator, the 4 in this example, is the number of equal parts that have been shaded or colored red. 1, 2, 3, 4. So there it is a visual representation. The next fraction is 3/6. And we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 equal parts again as your denominator. And out of the 6 equal parts, we have 1, 2, 3. 3 of them have been shaded in red, and that's our numerator. Now this example here, we can see we have the same denominator. When we have the same denominator, we don't really need visual representation like this. I mean, yeah, if it's there, use it. We can see here the 4/6 is actually greater than the 3/6. So already we know to use the greater than symbol. The other way to think about it is when the denominator is the same, you can kind of pretend they're not there for the purposes of finding the correct symbol to use to compare. I'm not saying you draw in your book, your practice paper like that, but just compare 4 to 3. Well, 4 is greater than 3. So you're pretending that the denominator is not there. You can do that when the denominator is the same. Okay? Just ignore them for the purposes of finding the correct. For example, if I had 2/6 and 1/6, I don't need to look up here or draw the representation. I pretend the 6 aren't here. And 2 is greater than 1. So when I'm comparing 2/6 to 1/6, I use my greater than symbol. If I have 1/6 and 5/6 and I'm comparing, again, I'll pretend that these aren't here. Well, 1 is less than 5, so then 1/6 is less than 5/6. I'll use the symbol accordingly. So let's go on to the next example. We have circles now, and this time we're missing the fractions. So there's more practice with these skills. First writing the fractions and then comparing. So we've got 1, 2, 3, 4 as our denominator. There's 4 total equal parts. Out of the 4, we've got 1, 2, 3 of them. 3/4 or 3/4 has been shaded in. For this circle here, we've got 1, 2, 3, 4. Out of the 4, we've got 1, 2, 2/4 have been shaded in. Now when we're comparing these, you're comparing 3/4 to 2/4. We can see there's a lot more red here above the 3/4. This is greater than the 2/4, so we use that symbol. 3/4 is greater than 2/4. And going back to the previous example or reference, when you had the 3/4 and the 2/4, you could pretend the 4s or the 4ths are not there, and you're comparing 3 to 2. Well, 3 is greater than 2. That way you can solve these without the visual representations. If I had 1/4 to, again, 3/4, when I'm comparing those, I pretend the 4ths or the quarters are not there. And 1 is less than 3. So 1/4 is less than 3/4. Hopefully you're starting to get that. With the same denominator, same number on the bottom, just pretend they're not there and compare the numerators. And think of it that way. So the third example down here in the bottom left, we have some bar strips, or we have some fractions, 4/8, 4/10, and we're going to colour them in. So I'm going to colour in the 4/8. We've got 1, 2, 3, 4. 4 out of the 8, 4/8. The next one, 4/10. 1, 2, 3, 4. So a slight change now from the previous two examples. The previous two examples we were comparing the same fractions that had the same denominator. In this example we're comparing fractions that have the same numerator, the same top number. And when we compare those, we can use the visual. We can see here 4/8. There's the 4/8. And there's your 4/10. You can see the 4/8 is greater than the 4/10. So we use the greater than symbol. What you can do is think about it. When you're comparing fractions that have the same numerator, look at the denominator. You have 8 and 10. The smaller the smaller the number the denominator is, it's actually the bigger the fraction. Might seem somewhat confusing, but the smaller the number that you see here is actually the bigger the fraction. Okay, if you can try and remember that. 8 is smaller than 10 as a number, but as a fraction it's actually bigger. So that's the greater than symbol. So if we didn't have this visual representation here to help us, hopefully you can remember, when the numerators are the same, look at the denominator, the bottom numbers, the bottom part of the fraction. Whichever one is the smallest is actually the bigger fraction. So hopefully I'm not confusing you too much, but let's go on to the next example here and we'll see how we get on. We've got 3/4 and 3/5, so I'm just color in 3 out of the 4 here. 3/4 and 3/5. 1, 2, 3/5. Similar type of question in that the numerator, the top number is the same. So we can use the visual representation here to help us. And we can see that the 3/4, very poorly copied over, 3/4 or 3/4 is greater than 3/5. It's greater than, it's bigger than. We can also use the same rule or the same, when the numerator is the same, look at the bottom denominator. Whichever is the smallest, 4 is the smallest, it's actually the biggest fraction. So that tells us 3/4 is greater than 3/5. And our final example here now, we've got fraction line, or fractions on a number line, I should say. We're going to mark in the 2/6. There's the 2/6. 2/4. So again, we've got fractions that have the same numerator. And even without looking here, this is the smaller of the numbers, but it's actually the greater of the fraction. 4 is smaller than 6, but it's actually a greater fraction. So we can see here as well that this is greater than this. How we'll actually read that is 2/6 is less than 2/6 is less than 2/4. Somewhat confusing there, but sure, pause, rewatch, and give it a go. Good luck.